in the heart of a vast and lush American national park, far from the city lights and highways. There was a place unlike any other, a magical forest so green and alive, it seemed like it had grown straight out of a dream. This wasn't just any forest. This was Piney Creek Wildwoods, a secret corner of the country where the trees reached higher than rooftops, and the air always smelled like fresh rain and wildflowers. Everywhere you looked, the trees stretched tall and proud, their wide branches thick with leaves of every shade of green. These leaves formed a giant leafy ceiling called a canopy that made the whole forest feel cozy and protected. The sunlight still peeked through here and there, casting golden speckles on the mossy floor like twinkling stars on a green blanket. It was like building a blanket fort in your bedroom, snug, peaceful, and just a little dark, but in the best kind of way. Beneath this leafy roof, a whole world of creatures bustled about. Some were so small you could barely see them, while others were big and bold and full of personality. But no matter their size, they all called this forest home. The floor of the woods was soft and damp, covered in fallen leaves, twigs, and patches of squishy moss. The air was warm and a little bit sticky, just like the forest liked it. One of the tiniest but busiest residents of Piney Creek was a shimmering little bug called a shimmer cricket. They looked a bit like beetles and sounded a bit like music boxes, chirping softly through the trees. These glittery insects had shiny silver wings that sparkled like tinsel when they flew. Even though they were small, their songs echoed through the forest like lullabies, soothing all the animals, especially at bedtime. Every night, the shimmer crickets sang their sweet, whirring tunes. The birds nestled deeper into their nests. The raccoons curled their tails around themselves, and the little fox kids closed their sleepy eyes. You could imagine, if you listened closely, that the shimmer crickets were right outside your own window, singing to you too. Not far from the shimmer crickets lived a bright green tree frog named Finley. Finley was about the size of a small cookie and had smooth green skin, a pale yellow belly, and the brightest orange toes you'd ever seen. But what stood out most were his eyes, a brilliant ruby red that glittered in the moonlight. Finley spent his days lounging on the underside of big sycamore leaves, where it was cool and shady. His sticky toes helped him grip the leaves even when he was upside down. He was a master of hide and seek. His green skin helped him disappear into the leaves, and when he stayed still, no one could spot him. He waited patiently for tiny bugs to wander near. Then, pop, his long, sticky tongue would zip out and snatch them right out of the air. Maybe in your dreams, you'll be just like Finley, clever and camouflaged. You could sneak through the trees unnoticed, perfect for a game of forest hide-and-seek. Deep in the forest's quietest corners lived a sleepy snake named Tilda. Tilda was a northern pine boa, long and heavy with the skin like dark olive silk, dotted in chocolate-colored spots. She loved to stretch out near the bubbling creeks or curl up into warm, cozy coils beside the roots of the oldest trees. Tilda didn't slither fast or sneak about much. In fact, most of the time she just napped, her head resting gently on the curve of her tail. When she did move, it was slow and smooth, like a ribbon gliding through the water. Her favorite place to swim was Willow Pond, where the water was warm and the mud at the bottom was soft and squishy. She would glide along with just her eyes above the surface, as quiet as a whisper. No one even knew she was there. until she smiled. Then there were the forest dragons. Or at least, that's what they looked like. But really, they were big green lizards called ridgebacks. One of them, named Max, was as long as a bike and had jagged spines down his back that made him look like a tiny dinosaur. He loved climbing trees, chasing beetles, and snacking on sweet berries that grew high above the ground. Max could leap from one branch to another, and sometimes even jumped into the creek with a giant splash, swimming with a goofy grin on his scaly face. If you ever dreamed of climbing the tallest tree in the world, you'd want Max by your side. He knew every branch and every shortcut, and could show you the best places to look out over the forest canopy, where the world looked like a sea of green clouds. And just when you thought you'd seen all the magic Piney Creek had to offer, a slow, fuzzy friend would come dangling down from the trees. Her name was Luna, and she was a three-toed sloth. Luna had soft gray-brown fur and a sweet little face that always looked like it was smiling. She moved slower than anyone else in the forest, but she was never in a hurry. Luna loved to nap in the crooks of tree branches, her long arms wrapped tightly around the bark. She could sleep for hours and hours, dreaming of nothing in particular. She never worried about anything, not what time it was or how high she'd climbed. All she needed was a sunny spot and a soft breeze, and she was happy. Imagine yourself curled up like Luna in your bed right now, safe, still, and just the right kind of sleepy. Maybe your blanket is a leafy branch, your pillow a cushion of moss. Maybe, just maybe, if you close your eyes and listen closely, you'll hear the shimmer crickets singing you a lullaby from the woods of Piney Creek. And while you drift off, the forest will keep dreaming too, buzzing softly with its tiny crickets, rustling leaves and slow, sleepy sloths, waiting for the next day of wonder. By the time the sun had climbed over the hills surrounding Piney Creek Wildwoods, the forest had already come alive again. Shafts of sunlight slipped through the leafy ceiling above, painting golden puddles on the forest floor. Tiny shadows scurried across the mossy ground as animals hurried about their morning routines. Today was a special day because today we would meet even more of the magical animals that made this wild forest their home. Down near the creek in a clearing surrounded by ferns and tall grass, a very curious creature waddled out of the bushes. It was a snoot-nosed anteater named Benny. Benny was long and shaggy, with brown and tan fur that looked like someone had swept a giant paintbrush down his back. He walked with a funny little strut, his bushy tail dragging behind him like a fuzzy broom. Benny had the longest nose in the forest, so long it almost touched the ground. But that nose wasn't for sniffing flowers. No, Benny used it to search for anthills and termite mounds. He'd sniff around until he found the perfect one. Then, sloop, out would come his long pink tongue, sticky and quick like a piece of spaghetti. He'd slurp up hundreds of bugs in just a few seconds, closing his eyes with joy at the crunchy, squirmy feast. Benny wasn't in a rush. He never was. He liked to take his time, strolling from one anthill to the next, humming a happy tune through his nose. He'd pause now and then to scratch his belly or swish his tail at a curious butterfly. If you had a pet anteater like Benny, you might take him for walks in the park, just like a dog. Though you'd probably have to stop every 10 feet so he could sniff around a bit. Farther downstream, where the water flowed wide and slow, lived another friendly face, Callie the capybara. She was big and round and looked like a gigantic guinea pig with short brown fur and tiny ears. Her eyes were gentle and always sleepy looking, like she had just woken up from a nap and was already thinking about her next one. Callie loved the water. She could paddle and dive better than most fish. In the heat of the afternoon, she'd slip into the river with a plunk and float quietly with only her nose and ears peeking out. Sometimes her best friends would join her, an iguana riding on her back, or a few little birds hopping across her fur like she was a moving island. Everyone loved Callie. She never snapped or growled or fussed. She was the kind of friend who'd let you use her as a pillow without complaining. Monkeys brushed her fur. Birds sang from her shoulders. Even baby turtles sometimes rode along her back, hitching a ride from one riverbank to another. If you ever visited Piney Creek in your dreams, you definitely want to meet Callie. You could nap beside her in the sun or dive into the water and swim alongside her slow, peaceful strokes. High above all this, in the tallest trees with the thickest branches, there was a different kind of action happening. Zipping from vine to vine, chasing each other around tree trunks. And giggling, yes, giggling, were the forest monkeys. One of them, a mischievous little guy named Ziggy, was the fastest of them all. Ziggy had soft golden fur and a long curly tail that he used like a fifth arm. He'd swing across branches, grab bananas, or tickle his friends with that tail. Ziggy and his monkey troop were always playing tag, hide and seek, even leafy peekaboo with the parrots. They flipped, tumbled, and leapt with glee, their squeaky chatter echoing through the trees like laughter. They reminded the forest of children at recess, bursting with energy and wild ideas. And just like kids when the sun started to dip and the shadows grew longer, the monkeys got quieter. One by one, they snuggled together on wide, leafy platforms, curling up like kittens and resting their heads on each other's bellies. But Piney Creek wasn't just about the trees or the ground. The river that twisted and turned through the forest held its own kind of wonder. Deep in the cool waters swam a creature so playful and so rare that even the trees whispered about it. The river dolphin. Her name was Misty, and unlike ocean dolphins, Misty was soft gray with a slight pink tint that sparkled in the morning light. She had a long snout, perfect for chasing fish through twisting reeds and smooth river rocks. Misty loved company. When boats passed by with scientists or campers, she'd swim alongside them, leaping up and diving down again in loops of joy. Misty didn't speak like humans, but she did talk in her own way, clicks, chirps, and whistles that echoed through the water, like a song only the river could hear. She called to her dolphin friends, and to the turtles on the riverbanks, to the birds flying overhead, and maybe even to you, if you were lucky enough to dream of her. She played tag with the current and raced to the bubbles, and when the sun dipped low, Misty would slow down, drifting through golden reflections, as if the whole river had turned to honey. Her voice would soften to sleepy clicks, a lullaby just beneath the surface of the water. And what's a magical forest without a little mystery? Just before the stars appeared, when the sky turned purple and the air got still, the jaguar stepped out of the shadows. His name was Shadow, and his fur was the color of soft sand, covered in black rosettes like ink blots on paper. His eyes glowed like polished amber, deep and quiet and wise. Shadow moved like a whisper. Even the dry leaves didn't crunch beneath his paws. He padded through the trees, leaping into the branches like they were stairs, not making a single sound. He wasn't hunting, just watching. The forest was his kingdom, and every creature respected him. But Shadow didn't act like a king. He was more like a guardian. When he walked past, the animals didn't run. The shimmer crickets kept singing. The monkeys kept napping. Even the fireflies blinked softly, lighting his path. If you were lucky enough to see Shadow in your dreams, it meant the forest trusted you, that you were part of it now, that you too could walk silently through the trees and know every secret path beneath the stars. And as the wind picked up gently through the branches and the leaves swayed like a lullaby, Piney Creek Wildwoods settled down once more. The shimmer crickets sang. Luna, the sloth, shifted gently in her sleep. Misty floated beneath the moonlight. And you, safe and warm beneath your own blanket canopy, drifted into a peaceful dream where the river glowed and the trees whispered, and every creature in the forest waited to see you again tomorrow. Morning light poured into Piney Creek Wildwoods like warm syrup, slipping through the tall pines and sycamores, waking up every creature with its golden glow. The forest yawned and stretched as birds chirped high in the canopy, and the breeze danced playfully through the leaves. Today, a new adventure was beginning, a journey to meet some of the loudest, brightest, and cleverest animals of the wild woods. High above the forest floor, where the branches swayed gently like hammocks, a sudden burst of color flashed between the trees. It was a macaw, no, 3 macaws, racing through the air like a splash of paint across the sky. These birds weren't just colorful, they were rainbows with wings. One was red and yellow with hints of green. Another was sky blue with golden feathers. And the third had a mixture of all the colors, like a box of crayons that had come to life. They flew fast and low, weaving between trunks and vines, calling to each other with raspy, silly voices that echoed like laughter through the woods. One of them, a bold little macaw named Pico, landed on a branch and tilted his head curiously. "Hello," Pico squawked. He was always shouting something, words he'd picked up from campers, explorers, and park rangers who had wandered through Piney Creek. "Pretty bird," he yelled. "What's that?" "Too loud." His voice was scratchy but cheerful, and the other birds laughed at his echoing chatter. At night, when the forest was quiet and still, Pico would snuggle into his nest way up high and mumble to himself in sleepy bird speech. "Good night, good night," he'd whisper, tucking his beak under his wing. And sometimes, just sometimes, if you were falling asleep in your own bed and the wind was blowing just right, you might swear you heard him whispering sweet dreams in the distance. Not far from where Pico perched lived a very different kind of bird, silent, powerful, and watchful. It was the great horned owl of Piney Creek, an elder of the forest named Amos. His feathers were streaked with gray and brown, and his eyes were round and golden like the moon. Amos only flew when the stars were out, and when he did, not a single sound followed. Not a flap, not a swoosh, just silence. He watched over the forest from above, perched on a crooked pine branch, like a guardian of dreams. While others slept, Amos kept watch, his head slowly turning, always listening. And when he spotted something rustling in the underbrush, a fox kid chasing a beetle or a raccoon tumbling through the leaves, he'd blink slowly and whisper a soft "hoo, hoo" into the night. One night he landed gently on a tree just above Luna, the sloth, who was snoring softly with a tiny leaf stuck to her fur. Amos gave a gentle "hoo" and tucked his wings in close. Even the stars seemed quieter when he was near, but not everyone in the forest was quiet or calm. Down in the lower part of the woods, past the fallen logs and the fairy ring mushrooms, lived a band of raccoons who were always up to something. They were brothers and sisters, and their leader was a sneaky little rascal named Rocket. Rocket had shiny black eyes, a fluffy striped tail, and more energy than 10 squirrels on a sugar rush. He and his siblings would wait until nightfall, then set off on their mischief missions, tipping over berry baskets left behind by hikers, stealing shiny spoons from campsites, and chasing fireflies through the mist like tiny blinking treasure. Rocket believed everything was a game. He'd sneak up on a sleeping armadillo and poke it, then dash away giggling. He once painted his own tail with crushed blueberries, just to see if it would scare his sisters. It didn't. But deep down, Rocket was sweet. He always made sure the tiniest raccoons got the softest moss for sleeping, and he'd share a stolen spoon with anyone who looked lonely. One evening, as the moon began to rise, Rocket found a quiet puddle that reflected the stars. He stared at it for a long time, his mischievous grin fading into a gentle smile. "Looks like the sky fell down," he whispered, curling up beside it. "Let's keep it safe." Across the forest, the trees suddenly rustled, and a soft thud hit the forest floor. A family of deer had entered the clearing. The smallest one, a fawn named Maple, looked around with wide eyes and took her first careful steps into the moonlight. Her legs were still wobbly, and her fur was speckled with white dots like snowflakes. Her mother nudged her forward gently, and Maple let out a tiny sneeze before trotting forward bravely. She loved everything: the smell of wildflowers, the feel of soft grass under her hooves, the flutter of butterflies that landed on her nose. Maple had a heart full of wonder and a spirit full of adventure. She didn't run too fast or jump too high. She just watched, listened, and felt the forest in her own special way. She was the first to notice when the trees whispered a new sound, or when the wind changed direction. She could tell when rain was coming just by the smell of the air. Maple's gift was sensing the forest's mood, and the forest seemed to love her right back. One day, she followed a dragonfly all the way to the edge of Misty's river. She stood still as the dolphin surfaced, blinking her shiny eyes and blowing a puff of air from her blowhole. "Hi," Maple whispered. Misty chirped in return, and for a moment, two very different worlds met in silence: land and water, hoof and fin, deer and dolphin. Then the dragonfly zipped away again, and Maple turned back, her tail flicking with excitement. As the stars began to fill the sky once more, something special started to happen, just like it did every evening in Piney Creek. The animals, one by one, began to settle down. Luna stretched her arms and curled up again. Benny the anteater yawned a long, lazy yawn. Even Rocket, sticky with berry juice, finally flopped into his mossy den with his siblings. And above them all, high in the trees, Pico tucked himself into his nest and whispered, "Good night, forest." You, tucked into your own bed, could imagine it all. The owl watching from above, the deer stepping gently through the grass, the river glowing under the moon, and every animal, loud, quiet, wild, and gentle, wishing you a peaceful, dreamy sleep. As morning mist curled like sleepy ribbons between the trunks of the trees, Piney Creek Wildwoods stretched and blinked awake once again. The sunlight filtered gently through the canopy, sparkling off raindrops left behind by a quiet overnight shower. Everything smelled fresh, like pine needles, damp bark, and tiny blooming wildflowers. The forest was waking up, and today it had something very exciting planned. In the tangled heart of the forest, where the trees grew close together and vines dangled like jungle ropes, lived a group of animals who were always on the move. They leapt, they swung, they shouted, they laughed. Today we'd be spending time with the most playful and loudest friends in the woods, the apes. Now these weren't just monkeys. The apes were bigger, stronger, and, if you ask them, much smarter. One of them, a wide-shouldered and clever gorilla named Tavi, was especially proud of his skills. Tavi had a shiny black coat, gentle eyes, and a big brain full of ideas. He could stack rocks into towers, break nuts open with sticks, and even make simple maps by drawing shapes in the dirt. Tavi loved teaching the younger apes. He'd show them how to build leaf shelters, how to find the juiciest berries, and how to listen for changes in the forest. "If the birds go quiet," he once said, tapping his head, "that means something big is moving nearby. Maybe a bear, maybe a storm, maybe a human with the trail mix." The little ones followed him everywhere, copying his moves and asking endless questions. He didn't mind. He'd just smile, ruffle their fuzzy heads, and keep exploring. But even Tavi had a silly side. When the work was done and the sun was high, he'd start a game of tag using tree branches. The apes would swing wildly through the air, hooting and hollering, chasing each other through the green canopy like living comets. It was a sight to see, branches bouncing, leaves fluttering, and laughter echoing across the forest. While the apes ruled the treetops down by the riverbank, another group of clever creatures was hard at work. Beavers. A family of them lived near the bend in the stream, where the water flowed steadily and the banks were soft and muddy. Their leader, an ambitious beaver named Juniper, had big dreams and even bigger teeth. Juniper had built one of the finest lodges in all of Piney Creek. It was made of thick branches, packed with mud and leaves, and was nearly as wide as a small cabin. Inside, it was dry and cozy, with underwater entrances and soft moss for beds. But Juniper wasn't done building, not by a long shot. Every morning, she waddled out with a stick in her mouth, determined to make her dam even better. She adjusted logs, checked water flow, and shouted instructions with little squeaks and tail slaps. The other beavers followed her lead, busy as, well, beavers. But when the work was done, they'd float on their backs in the water, chewing on twigs and humming in beaver speak. Sometimes Misty the dolphin would stop by, and they'd trade stories through chirps and squeaks and splashes. The forest didn't care if you had fur or fins. As long as you were kind and curious, you were welcome. Just upstream from Juniper's dam, in a sunny glade near the rocks, a different kind of builder was busy at work. A pack of turtles. Now, turtles aren't known for being fast, but what they lack in speed, they make up for in patience and teamwork. There were 5 of them in the group, and they called themselves the Shell Squad. Their leader, a wise old turtle named Otto, had a shell the color of old bronze and eyes that blinked very slowly. Otto wasn't in a hurry. He believed that the forest was meant to be savored, one step at a time. Otto and the Shell Squad had a tradition. They built tiny rock gardens wherever they went, using smooth stones from the river and colorful pebbles from the paths. They made spiral patterns and little towers. Sometimes they'd even leave a shiny seed or a pine cone on top, just in case someone needed a little surprise to brighten their day. Kids who wandered through the park sometimes found the turtle gardens and gasped in delight. No one ever saw the turtles building them because they worked quietly and slowly, often at dawn or dusk. But the gifts they left behind made the forest feel even more magical. As the sun climbed higher and the forest warmed, a gentle rumble echoed in the distance. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a bear. It was Harley, the bison. Yes, a bison. Most people didn't expect a bison in a forest, like Piney Creek, but Harley had found his way here long ago and decided never to leave. He was huge, his back as high as a camper van, and his thick brown fur bristled like shaggy blankets. But Harley wasn't scary. He was calm, steady, a walking mountain. When Harley moved, the earth seemed to hum beneath him. He walked slowly through the tall grass, letting butterflies land on his nose and birds ride along his back. His breath came out in long, warm snorts, and when he lay down in the afternoon sun, you could swear the world itself sighed in relief. He didn't speak much, but the other animals loved being near him. Tavi sometimes leaned against Harley when he wanted to think. Juniper brought him fresh sticks as gifts. Even Rocket the raccoon once tried to ride on his back, though Harley didn't notice, and Rocket fell off with a whump. The day passed gently, like a slow-moving stream. The beavers rested in their lodge. The turtles finished a garden near the mossy rocks. The apes swung their final swing and stretched out in the sun. Even Harley took a deep breath and let it out in one big as the sky turned orange and the shadows grew long. The whole forest began to slow down. One by one, animals tucked themselves in, under leaves, inside hollow logs, behind waterfalls, and on soft beds of moss.